WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wiseye.org/donate or by texting WisEye to 44321.
Kristin Lyerly of Green Bay is the Democratic candidate for the 8th Congressional District. The election is November 5th. Kristin Lyerly, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a joy to be here with you.
Thank you for participating in our candidate interviews. Our first question, why are you running for this office and how would you describe your campaign's key message?
I have a long history of advocacy work as an OBGYN doctor. And when politics started interfering in my ability to take care of my patients, that was when I first stepped into the ring. That was back in 2020 with COVID. My oldest son and I went to one of the 2 polling places that were open in Green Bay, and we saw people standing in long lines in dreary weather, 6 feet apart, masks on, not knowing what was safe and what wasn't safe. Remember what April was like in 2020? It was so scary. And I just wanted to be part of the solution. So that was when I translated my advocacy work into the political world, and I ran for state assembly in the 88th district up here. And when that was over, because it was never about the seat, it was always about making a difference. So when that was over, I turned my attention to the Fair Maps movement. We worked to get Governor Evers reelected, to get Janet Protasewicz on the bench. And then I knew that it was my turn to run for U.S. Congress here in the 8th CD. And we haven't looked back.
Well, what do you consider to be the most pressing challenge before the country? And is there some specific action that you're planning to take if you're elected?
There are so many problems that the country is facing. Individuals are struggling to put food on their table and gas in their car. And our leaders are not effectively problem solving. We have the least effective Congress in decades, since the Depression. They squabble and they argue, but they don't get things done for the people of this country.
What can Congress do about that challenge you just mentioned?
They can work together. They can get past all of this partisan rhetoric. I mean, we saw this with the bipartisan border bill that was ready to go. It was created by some of the most conservative and liberal members of Congress because this is a problem that needs to be solved. But unfortunately, it was squashed for political reasons. We can do better, and we owe it to the people to do better.
You're talking about high prices for the people in your district. How do you see the current state of the economy overall, and what legislation or policy would you propose that could incentivize economic growth, specifically in Wisconsin?
When you look at the numbers for the economy, we actually are in a pretty good place when it comes to inflation. We're within the target zone. Inflation has been bad in the past. It was up to 9% about 2 years ago. But people are feeling it. People are really struggling to get by. So what do we need to do? We need to encourage growth. We need to invest in small business. We need to invest in the care economy so that people who want to go to work have the ability to go to work. We need to make child care affordable. We need to make health care affordable. There are so many places where we can make a difference just for everyday people.
In terms of policy on inflation, what are your thoughts on Congress's specific role? I know it's been, some say that there needs to, Medicare needs the ability to negotiate for prescription drug prices. Some call for reduced government spending, specifically discretionary spending. Are there any areas of spending or other congressional actions that you think are important?
That's one of Congress's biggest jobs, is regulating spending and making sure that we are being efficient with how we spend our money. Medicare being able to negotiate prescription drug prices is an absolute game changer. Americans pay so much more for our prescriptions than people do in other developed countries. And in fact, we have the most expensive health care in the developed world, but we have the worst outcomes in the developed world, especially when it comes to moms and babies, my patients. So there are numerous places where we as leaders can insert ourselves to make sure that we're making decisions on behalf of the people.
Are there some areas government spending you think should be cut back?
This is really tricky, right? It's the how much are you bringing in and how much are you getting out? And this is exactly what Congress has been really struggling with in the past couple of cycles. Where can we cut back on spending? Is it military? Is it Medicare? Is it Social Security? All of these things are things that we treasure, and we know we have to support all of these pillars, literally. Social Security is a great example. Most of us have been paying into Social Security our whole lives. We depend on Social Security, so to cut our benefits or to delay our benefits is not acceptable to Americans. That's not a place where we can cut. Medicare. Rural hospitals are barely able to stay open. Actually, most of them are operating at a deficit because Medicare does not reimburse adequately. Can we cut there? There are probably places where we can cut in many of these major programs, but we need to make sure that we are preserving the benefits that people require, especially when it comes to those pillars.
You mentioned childcare a little bit. It's been increasingly expensive to raise a family. What policies do you support that make raising a family more affordable? For instance, do you support a child tax credit? And if so, for whom? Or are there policies you support regarding childcare specifically?
I am the mom of 4 boys. I went to medical school when they were all young. I am still paying off the student loans that I had to take on in order to pay for childcare. So I get this issue on a real fundamental level. I think there are many different ways that we can attack this problem, and we just need to be very thoughtful about how we do it. The goal is to make sure that people who want to work, who want to be part of our economy, small business owners especially, so that they're able to participate in our economy. It could be tax credits, it could be numerous other things. And a lot of that is going to depend on what's going on in the state and what's going on locally. We have to also support our providers. If you look at in a county like Oconto County, only 1/3 of the people who want childcare are able to access safe, regulated childcare. This is unacceptable. This prevents people from going to work, participating in the economy, and lifting us all up.
So you would support expansion of childcare subsidies at the federal level?
Absolutely.
What about a childcare tax or child tax credit expansion?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Housing, cost of housing, another issue for Wisconsinites. What federal policies or legislation would you support that might lower the cost of housing either for renters or home buyers?
Housing is so expensive. My oldest son is a teacher, a public school teacher. He lives in Milwaukee, and it's paycheck to paycheck because housing is so very expensive, even when you've got a substantial job. Again, there are numerous different things, different opportunities that we can look at. When it comes to making sure that we've got affordable housing, a lot of it will depend on the regions where we live, but just making sure that we're being thoughtful about the way that we approach these policies.
Should there be federal funding on the table to help build new affordable homes?
I believe so. Federal funding and state initiatives as well, the federal government working with state leaders, because really the housing problems that we're seeing are very individualized and very regionalized. So a big bill that there's no such thing as a giant solution that's going to work for everybody. So we need to be able to provide the funding so that states and local municipalities can solve the problems in a way that works for them.
Do you have any specific thoughts on how to deal with high cost of rent? Some have talked about rent control. Is that a solution, or are there others?
Again, that is one solution. I think there are many solutions out there. People have to have a place to live. If you don't have a place to live, where do you go back to? Where do you eat your meals? Where do you raise your family? Where do you do all the things you need to do? We have to make housing affordable for people. And that also means that they have to be able to participate in the economy, in the job market, so that they can earn a living wage and help to pay for their own rent or their own mortgage. A healthy economy lifts all of us.
You mentioned Social Security as an important program. It does face potential long-term financing shortfalls. Are there any reforms to Social Security that you support that would ensure its future solvency? There's been many ideas on the table, from changing the retirement age. Some have proposed reducing payments to providers, cutting taxes on Social Security. What is a priority for you with Social Security?
Social Security is such a pillar, and so many people depend on Social Security. They've been paying into it their entire lives. It has to be there for them. Raising the age is unacceptable. Cutting the benefits is unacceptable. Really, what we need to do is have the wealthy pay their fair share.
Healthcare, which is a topic you know a lot about. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures in Wisconsin?
Where do we even start with this topic? As an OBGYN doctor who delivers babies in rural Minnesota right now, I've been deeply involved in rural healthcare, especially when it comes to moms and babies and families. And, I'm sad to tell you that here in Wisconsin, we've lost half of our rural obstetrical units in the past 20 years, actually more than that with the closures in western Wisconsin over the past year and a half. It is a profound failure of our healthcare system. Our healthcare system is for profit. It's not for people. When I see a patient in my exam room and I prescribe them a medication or send them to therapy, there's a 50-50 chance that they're not going to get what they need, that they're going to walk out in prior authorizations or inability to get to where they need to go, or the cost of their drug is going to make it impossible for them to receive the treatment that they need. We need an efficient healthcare system that we can access and afford, so that 60% of people who go through bankruptcy don't do it because they have a healthcare condition that completely ruins their lives and their families' lives.
Are there any federal policies that would address this? Any federal changes?
Medicare reform would make a huge difference. As a physician, we've seen actually almost a 25% decrease in physician pay. It is nearly impossible for an independent physician to practice these days. That's why you see all these doctors joining hospital groups, because they can't afford to practice on their own as the cost of practices continue to rise. So yes, there are numerous ways that we can make things more efficient on a federal level. Personally, I would love to see every single American have access to quality, affordable health care, and that is one of the driving forces behind my candidacy.
Local communities in Wisconsin are faced with a growing number of issues. For example, issues related to water quality, PFAS, which is a concern in your district, or a sudden influx of refugees like Wisconsin saw in 2021. How, as a member of Congress, would you plan to collaborate with local governments in your district to ensure that they have the necessary resources to address these types of local issues?
Yeah, we're doing this now as candidates. I'm working with all of the state level candidates here in the region to talk about these issues. So Andy Rich up in Marinette, PFAS in Marinette. Marinette is the third most contaminated PFAS site in the country. And nobody understands that better than Andy Rich, who is a climate expert running for state senate in that region. We talk to each other. We talk about how we can fix this problem, who we can talk to. Making these decisions and making change in the world isn't just one person saying, I'm going to do this. It is people working together and collaborating at all levels to make change on behalf of the people. We've got to fix the water system in Peshtigo. We've got to make sure that in Kewanee, these giant factory farms aren't contaminating people's wells and driving them out of their homes. Clean water is a huge problem in this district, and we've got plenty of folks who are super excited about working on it and solving that problem.
Are tax cuts or tax increases in any way a focus of your campaign? And just for example, do you support extending and making permanent those tax cuts from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 that are set to expire?
I am not a fan of that program. That was tax cuts for the rich and for corporations, and it increased the federal deficit. So there was nothing good about that program. What I would like to see is tax cuts for the middle class and for the wealthy to pay their fair share.
So Vice President Harris has proposed a middle class tax cut for people making $400,000 or less. Is that something you would vote for?
Yes, it is.
Are there any areas where taxes should be increased?
You know, I'd have to take a look at that. That's a little bit of a fine-tooth comb thing. I'd love to close some loopholes. When I talk with just regular people at the doors, they're frustrated by this sense of politicians talking about political things but not solving problems for regular people. Regular people pay their taxes. Regular people don't get to take advantage of all of these loopholes. So can we make the tax system more fair? I would love that.
You talked about reproductive rights and abortion policy as a feature of your campaign. Should there be a federal abortion policy passed by Congress?
We must have federal protections for abortion care, for reproductive health care, for contraception, for in vitro fertilization, IVF. We have to make sure that people have the ability to make their own decisions about their own health care. And I'm not even just talking about reproductive rights. I'm talking about all of us in all spheres of our lives. Nobody wants the government to come in and tell them you have to take this medicine or you can't have this even though you know that it's the right thing for you. All of us live different lives. All of us are individuals, and we have to be able to make our own decisions.
So you could see Congress passing right to abortion in as a federal policy.
That will be a major issue that I will work so hard on for my friends in Arkansas, where women are literally dying because they don't have access to this type of health care, in Texas, in Idaho. These stories are so very complicated and so individualized. We cannot legislate this type of health care.
What's your position on climate change, and what congressional actions do you support that balance environmental and economic concerns with economic growth and job creation?
I think that there's a huge opportunity for us here. Think about Wisconsin. We don't have oil here. We're not making money from drilling or fracking. This is a great opportunity for us to really dive into clean energy and to consider things like not only solar and wind, but also nuclear. Here in the 8th Congressional District, we only recently decommissioned a nuclear power plant. Are there opportunities for us to have safe nuclear here? So I'm all in on making sure that we have clean energy, but also recognizing that we can't make that transition like this. It needs to be a gradual transition to give people time to change and to accept that change. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be a long haul, but I think it's something that we absolutely need to do. And I'm hearing young voices say that over and over again. This is a priority for young people.
Sounds like you support incentives for renewable energy. What's your position on fossil fuel production?
We need fossil fuels. And right now, we are pumping out more fossil fuels than we have in a very long time. The Biden administration is very strong on that. We're going to need to continue doing that, but doing it in a safe way and making sure that as we are using our fossil fuels, we're doing it cleanly and thinking about the future and transitioning towards a cleaner energy future.
Moving on to foreign policy, national security. Should the U.S. continue to provide military support to Ukraine, and are there any conditions associated with that?
I think this is obviously a very complicated issue. In many ways, it's a proxy war. We have to support Ukraine. There's no question. As far as putting conditions on it, that just makes it more difficult for them to be able to use the funding in a way that will work for them. The same as it is for federal funding applying to local areas in Wisconsin. The federal government doesn't know what's happening in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but we here in Green Bay do. So I think we need to make sure that we are supporting Ukraine appropriately and allowing them to make those decisions and using diplomacy as much as we can.
How should the U.S. be balancing support for Israel with concerns over civilian casualties in Gaza in the Israel-Hamas war?
This is such a heartbreaking situation. I think about October 7th and the terrible attacks on Israel. And as someone we all have grown up with this conflict. I mean, it's as old as time. It needs to be resolved. I support Israel, of course, but I also support the Palestinian people. And to see all of the death and destruction that's happening, especially, I mean, these are children and women mostly who are dying. It's heartbreaking. Hamas needs to be stopped. But again, this is not a simple solution. This is something that will require a great deal of diplomacy, has always required a great deal of diplomacy, and ultimately my hope is that we'll end with a ceasefire and a two-state solution.
I have a couple of campaign spending questions for you. Are you troubled by the record-breaking amounts of out-of-state money being solicited by Wisconsin campaign operatives to influence our local election outcomes?
I think we're all really tired of that. Anybody who's watching TV right now is really tired of that. We need to get this dark money out of politics. We need to make politics local again. And it's not just politics on my level. I've seen city council races that have very ugly ads that have frankly cost excellent candidates, community engaged candidates, people who truly have made a difference and want to continue to be the change that their community needs to see. I've seen them lose seats because of this dark money. This is one thing that no matter who I talk with, they feel that we need to get this massive dark money out of politics, and I would love to be part of that solution.
A lot of that money is being spent on broadcast and streaming negative attack ads, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Many of them walk that fine line in terms of accuracy versus exaggeration. At a time when the nation is so divided, how would you respond to a voter that asks you if you're to stop running negative ads or to promise not to run negative ads?
A lot of that isn't under our control. So my campaign will not run negative ads. I have committed that we will run truthful and factual ads. And as a physician, I feel that it's my obligation to fight misinformation, not to add to the fray. But this dark money in politics comes from we don't know where, and they show up and run ads on our behalf. So sometimes it's not something that we can control or have any say in. That is a huge problem. It takes my message away from me, and how do people then know who I am and how I will represent them? It's unfair, and it's not real.
Transitioning to education, the number of Wisconsin school districts going to referendum asking local taxpayers for funding is increasing. Is there a need to increase federal spending on K-12 public education?
There is a need to increase spending and support for public education. And what we've seen here in Wisconsin has been devastating. My oldest son is a public school teacher. His dad is on the school board here in the Green Bay area. They are fighting to preserve a healthy public school environment, but it's a difficult, very challenging funding system that is preventing them from just being able to offer the services they need. It's already a hard enough job when you've got the funding, but when you're having to go and campaign for funding cycle after cycle after cycle, it makes it that much more complicated. In my own district, what we found last year was we nearly lost a referendum that was operational just to keep the lights on, because people are just tired of it. We need a better way to fund our public schools, and from a federal level, we can offer that support.
Do you support federal student loan forgiveness?
This is a really, young people love this. Older people don't necessarily love it. As someone who is continuing to pay off my student loans, I do in some cases, not universally, obviously. I need to pay my own student loans off. But I think that there are plenty of folks out there who really do need that leg up. What happened after I left school was federal student loans got much more expensive, and there are people out there who are hard-working people who are just never going to get ahead of their student loans. That doesn't make any sense. We should value education. We should encourage education. We should make sure that education is attainable and affordable. So I think for many people, student loan forgiveness is necessary.
The immigration issue. Mm-hmm. What would you focus on in an effort to fix what many feel is a broken immigration system?
Okay, two things. We need to secure our borders. We need to make sure that drugs and other things that we don't need coming across the border are stopped right there. But we also need to make sure that there is a safe, efficient path to citizenship. We need immigrants. Here in Green Bay, we need immigrants in the meatpacking plants and in the agriculture industry and in the nursing homes. This is how most of our families got their start in this country. Of course, it's a different time, but we need to make sure that they have an opportunity and that it is safe and efficient for them and their families.
Do you support any changes to the asylum process?
The asylum process is broken. It's in many cases the only way that people can get in. It's all part of the immigration piece that needs to be re-examined and made better. It just needs to be made better.
We're getting to our final questions here. What is the biggest difference between you and your opponent?
I am a moderate. I am someone who is from this community. My family's been here for 6 generations. I care deeply about my community. My opponent is an extremist, and he parrots Donald Trump. And in fact, if you look at his yard signs, Donald Trump endorsed, leads. Tony Weed comes second. That's not what the people of Northeast Wisconsin want. Here in Northeast Wisconsin, we choose a moderate. Mike Gallagher was a Republican moderate who was an independent thinker, like me. Reed Ribble was a moderate who was an independent thinker, like me. Steve Kagan was a Democrat who was a moderate and an independent thinker, like me. That is what the people of Northeast Wisconsin want. That is not what my opponent brings.
Given the steep national partisan divide, what's one issue you think has the potential to be resolved that would also bring parties together?
You know, I was really surprised after the Dobbs decision how Tammy Baldwin was able to bring people together to ensure that marriage equality was protected. I thought when she introduced that bill, there's no way this is going to work, not in this environment where we're so divided. Yet she had enough relationships and knew enough people who had skin in the game. I don't know what that issue is right now. I would have thought immigration, given the headway that we've made on immigration. Maybe that is because it's top of mind for so many people, because the bill is there and all it needs is a little bit more support. Maybe that's the thing, but it's hard to know. But I'll tell you, whatever it is, I really appreciate working with folks from other sides of the aisle, folks with different perspectives, folks with creative ideas. That's what builds communities. That's what helps to solve problems, and that's what I'll bring to Washington, D.C.
Well, thank you, Kristin Lyerly of Green Bay. You are the Democratic candidate for the 8th Congressional District. The election is November 5th. Thank you, Kristin Lyerly, for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much for having me.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.